Hello, y'all. I feel like it's been a couple days since I did this. Been watching the weather, in particular, of course, the ongoing rolling disaster that was Hurricane Helene, which hit first in Florida and then went up through the U.S. Southeast and finally wreaked its vengeance on the western part of North Carolina in the Appalachian Mountains, creating a disaster, a truly shattering disaster that is even yet 2 weeks later still being assessed properly. Um, the first assessment was that they would have a $110 billion financial hit. And then I saw a few days later, or a few days ago, 160 billion. And my prediction is still it's a $200 billion event. And it could even go higher than that. Of course, it'll take years and years to pay any of that out because they have roads to build in canyons, carved out of mountainsides, bridges to rebuild, some of them quite substantial, carved into mountainsides with heavy equipment. It's going to be a decade-long project if they even do it, and they might not. The disaster in Appalachia may be so profound as to be unendurable. There's just turning up the volume. There's no coming back. 2 weeks later, we had Hurricane Milton, which came from the same hurricane spawning grounds as Helene, followed a very similar track, also came ashore in Florida, slightly different track, and it crossed Florida right in the center, right across the state, and beat up both sides of Florida. They got a substantial storm surge. The hurricane broke up a little bit as it came ashore, so they really did dodge a bullet. But they got a substantial storm surge across the west side of Florida, again, right after Helene. In fact, they hadn't even gotten around, I shouldn't say bothered, they hadn't gotten around to cleaning up the mess from Hurricane Helene when Milton came ashore. And then Milton, I was watching this live on YouTube. Milton then spawned one of the biggest tornado outbreaks that has ever been seen. I think there have been bigger ones, but they ended up with something like 138 tornado warnings. And so far, the count, because you can only measure these things in the field, you have to go into the field. Experts go out and they look at the ground and they decide, okay, there really was a tornado here. And they're up to 28 tornadoes now. But, they could easily come up with 30, 40 pretty easily. We won't know for several weeks. We may never know because they're not going to tell you. They're not going to report it. There will be some other disaster that eclipses Milton, just as Milton has now eclipsed Helene and so on. Oh, and by the way, just in case you think that, two in a row is, unlikely, there's a third spinning up in the South Caribbean, pretty much where Helene spun up. And, it doesn't mean it's going to come to the U.S. Of course, it could go into Mexico. It could fizzle out somewhere in the Gulf of Mexico. We don't know, right? But there it is. It's takes about 2 weeks for these things to be born and to come, to go anywhere substantial. And, it's just getting started. So let's give it a couple of weeks. Right. 1, 2, 3, pretty much 2 weeks apart. Not really here to talk about the weather. We have an election season going on here in the United States. Lots of people are nervous about what's going to happen. One set of thoughts is that it's really close, and if Donald Trump and the Republicans win, they'll be happy with the win. They'll take their win. And, Kamala Harris, being a progressive and a Democrat, will probably say, yeah, well, he won. The American people have spoken. But if Trump loses, of course, he's going to foment a rebellion. So probably we end up with Donald Trump. And this is not really a problem for me. I'm not going to say I'm apolitical. I do vote. And I try to vote in a way that I think is going to cause the least amount of harm to the most amount of people. But, in the end, politics doesn't help us with our current actual problem, which is global heating. Again, I pretty quite consistent. Politics, economics, and religion are are not part of this discussion. Global heating and the resulting climate change are taking place in the realms of physics. We know about them, we study them using the tools of science. It's data, it's numbers, it's charts, it's maps, it's figures, it's scientific papers, it's scientific consensus, discussions, and what can I say? It's science, and most people don't understand science. These problems, global heating, exist entirely, completely within the realm of science. It's physics. And if you're not interested in science and physics, well, then I guess you'll just never get this. You'll just never understand it. And that's fine. It's just a fact. You think whatever you like, say whatever you like. We'll turn the corner. The governments of the world will come together and they'll hold hands and sing kumbaya. Think whatever you like, unless you understand physics and understand science and understand what's happening and just accept that it's really happening. Well, then that's it. You're done. Unless you do that, we're done. And you can vote for Donald Trump, vote for Kamala Harris. I don't really care. Neither one of them is going to do anything because that's politics. That's not science. And I don't even think you could elect a scientist to be president of the United States and see any changes, because that person would have to be a politician. That could be a scientist. You could elect the ghost of Sagan, or Einstein or whoever, and you would end up being they'd end up having to be a politician, so they couldn't do anything about global heating. Because to solve global heating, which you can't solve because global heating is a wicked problem and has no solutions. That's the definition of a wicked problem. I didn't make that up. Look up wicked problem and read it and understand what I'm talking about. Because global heating has no solution, because it doesn't. Once it happens, you're stuck with it. Then there's nothing in politics or economics or even religion. Pray if you want, I guess. Go ahead. If it makes you feel better, but it's not going to solve your problem because there is no solution. And I think what's happening is that people, even though they have no background in science and they have no desire to know anything about science or physics or anything else, or the earth or the system, they can't even find nations on the map most of the time. Most of them deny that the earth is even a globe, right? Or it's round in any way, shape, or form. Nevertheless, despite their willful ignorance and their lack of education, and the media's complicit, denial of this as a problem, and the cesspool of misinformation that is social media, right? TikTok, Facebook, YouTube, even, right? It's just a sewer of misinformation. A lot of it comes out of Russia. A lot of it comes out of China. Yeah, fine. We know who the bad guys are, but a lot of it comes out of the Republican Party right here in good old United States of America. So, depending on where you're getting your information, you just don't believe it. And yet I think people are believing it. Now, the problem is, and I've alluded to this in other videos, how to say this. The problem with not understanding how things work is that when you are confronted with the fact that shit is not working for you, and yet you don't understand it, you turn to what I'm going to call, in the generic, witch hunts. And of course, you should know, look it up if you don't believe me. Witch hunts were a thing, even fairly recently. If someone didn't like, literally, if someone didn't like the weather, no joke. If someone didn't like the weather, they would go looking for an old woman living alone in a shack to hang. This is not a joke. They really did that. Why did they do that? Well, you could say on the one hand, it's a splendid opportunity to get rid of somebody in your village that you don't like. She's always glaring at us with her one good eye, and she's always, cackling under her breath or swearing at people. Well, yeah, she's a tired, lonely, bitter old woman, and probably no one's treating her properly anyway. So she's, you know, cursing you and saying that you're all bad, and you probably are bad because you're neglecting her and you've shoved her out of the village and made her go live on the edge of the forest, and she's scared all the time and no one treats her well. So yeah, and then when the weather's bad and the crops fail or the rats come out of the well and they eat all the grain in the silos or whatever the hell happens, right? Some random bullshit, or a plague comes through or the waves come up on the beach and crack the boats and whatever. uh yeah, you go, This is witchcraft. I don't understand this. This can't be possible. This has never happened before. This is really bad. Who are we going to blame?" And they get the old woman and they hang her from the oak and they feel better about themselves. It's therapy. It's group therapy. Witch hunts are a thing. And, the last few videos, maybe going back 4 or 5 videos, I said, look, global heating, climate change is going to get so bad and people are going to be so confused. They're going to be so confused. Ah, God. This is going to be. Is there a stronger word than confused? People working outside. Flabbergasted? Gobsmacked? So profoundly confused that they will lose their fucking minds. That's what people do. People do not turn to science when they're confused. That would actually make some sense. But science is scary and science is intimidating, right? And those scientists, I mean, they're always kind of, lording over us as they know so much and they can read charts and they got data. They put all those satellites up there. Aren't they fancy, right? And you don't want to go to the scientists because you hate them because they're another class and they got degrees and PhDs and they sound so smart all the time, right? Why would you go to them when you're confused? That's the last place you're going to go. No, I'm confused. I want vengeance. I want to be validated. I want to be told I'm good. I don't want this shit coming down from the sky and things destroying my village and destroying my life and turning my truck upside down. I don't want that. I don't want to be told that I'm in the wrong place at the wrong time. I don't want to be told that the weather's changing in a way that's going to destroy me and my community. I don't want to be told the sea level is going to rise and destroy our community on the sea. I don't want to be told these things. And I'm certainly not going to go to the scientists for mental relief because my God, they're the ones who are telling me this. So what am I going to do? I'm just going to be confused and angry and confused. I want to blame somebody. It's somebody's fault. It's not my fault. How can it be my fault? I'm a hardworking American. I'm blue collar. America strong. Wave the flag. Second Amendment. I'm doing everything right. I pray every day. I go to church, and Jesus loves me, and God is saving everyone's soul. And why would any of this have anything to do with God or me and me not praying or anything at all? It's something else. Who? It's somebody. Somebody did something. Witches. It's witches. We haven't had us a good witch hunt. We haven't had us a good witch hunt in, I don't know, a century. All right. We're going to find out who to blame for this. Americans are losing their minds. They're frightened. They're backed into a corner. You go to these videos about just pick one, anyone, maybe earlier on, but just pick a video where all of this stuff was being live streamed and people coming out of their houses covered in mud and all this kind of stuff, and houses floating down the river and people crying about how their house floated away and all the roads are gone. It's going to be 10 years before we fix the roads. And then you go into the comments on that video. You go into the comments. Just I dare you. It's a sewer. It's a sewer. It's like an insane asylum. It's like as you scroll through the comments, it's like you're walking down the aisle of an insane asylum. And there's this guy over here, and he's in a straitjacket in a chair, and he's screaming about the lizard people in Washington D.C. are seeding the hurricanes with airplanes, and you can see it on the flight tracking. And this other guy over here, he's like, it's HAARP, whatever HAARP is, right? And this woman over here is, I don't know how they're doing it, but the Democrats somehow are causing these hurricanes. And someone else is saying, oh, yeah, there's FEMA is broke because FEMA, Federal Emergency Management Agency, FEMA spent all their money giving transgender operations to illegal immigrants. Go into the comments. I'm not making this up. I'm not even clever enough to make up shit like this. This is what people talk about when they've lost their mind. And I think they have good reason to lose their mind. They have good reason to lose their mind. Their world is coming unstitched. Their world is being destroyed right before their very eyes. I can imagine a similar thing on the Titanic, right? The ocean liner that hit the iceberg. I can imagine there was lots of people that just lost their fucking mind. This can't be happening. What do you mean we hit an iceberg? Icebergs? What is that? What is that even? And this ship is supposed to be unsinkable. It says so right on my ticket. Wait, let me pull my ticket out. It says so right here on the back. Unsinkable. What the hell? What do you mean the ship is sinking? And they just lost their minds. You can lose your mind in seconds and just become completely paranoid and delusional and terrified and can't think clearly and, stand in one place and scream hysterically because you've lost your mind. You could go hide in a closet, jump off the ship into the water. Why'd you do that? That's nuts. We're sinking. And you jump off the ship into the water. I'm certain that happened all over the place on the sinking Titanic, especially as the deck began to tilt and the thing began to slide under the water. People who just didn't think it was possible and were drinking the free drinks at the bar and eating the free pasta, they finally just jumped off into the water, killed themselves. Went back to their room and got out their Derringer and shot themselves in the head because they just lost their minds. They lost their minds. Couldn't handle it. Couldn't deal with it. Yeah, that's what happens. People lose their minds. They don't understand. They don't get it. They don't know where this is coming from. They don't know where this is going. They're confused. They're angry. And of course, they're being selfish and they're being childish and they're being narcissistic. And I know the truth and scientists don't know the truth. So they must be lying. And I know the truth. And I don't know why I know the truth, but the truth is it's the other thing. It's sunspots. It's something else. And, I didn't do anything wrong. Well, yeah, you burned fossil fuels. And worse than that, you're dependent on them. You can't even stop. And when the scientists come along and say, yeah, we have to curtail our consumption of fossil fuels, and you look at your life, and you may only look at your life for 5 seconds when someone says that, oh, yeah, we have to curtail our consumption of fossil fuels. It must go to zero. I mean, zero is the actual number we're headed for. But on the way to zero, we must quickly curtail our consumption of fossil fuels, or this is just going to get worse. And you take exactly 5 seconds, subconsciously, 5 seconds. Curtail my consumption of fossil fuel, and your whole life flashes before your eyes. You're on the Titanic, and someone just said, "Yeah, this ship is sinking," and 2 seconds, your entire life flashes before your eyes. You're on this ship, and it's sinking, and someone tells you, "Yeah, you're going to have to curtail your consumption of fossil fuels," and in 2-3 seconds, everything about your life, you just realize everything about your life is done, and so you're angry. And you're a little bit confused. And how did this happen? And all of that flashes through your brain in 3 seconds, and you immediately bury it. Because that's how denial works. You just bury it. No, this isn't happening. This can't be happening. What do you mean? No. It must be something else. No. It's got to be something else. So it's something else. What is it? Who the hell knows? Not your problem, right? But you're going to lose your mind now because you just suppressed in 3 seconds the most important news you ever heard in your entire life. Like being diagnosed with stage 4 cancer. You're going to suppress that. It's a lie. I hate you. Get out of my face. I'm going home. And you drink yourself to death. Okay, fine. That's your choice. But for the rest of us, we're dealing with climate change. We're dealing with global heating. And it's a fact. And it's not going away. And our dependency on fossil fuels, crude oil for the most part, but also natural gas and coal to various degrees, our dependency for everything we do and everything we have and everything we know and practically everything we say or are able to have a conversation about is due to our consumption of fossil fuels every single day, 24 hours a day, 365 days a year, since the time before we were born. Our mothers in pregnancy relied on food to carry us to term that came from an economy that was based 100% on continuous consumption and increasing continuous consumption of fossil fuels. And so when someone comes along and says, "Yeah, these hurricanes, they're acting weird and they're being violent, and the whole world is full of violence." I mean, look at the news. If you want to look at the world news, not that you would because you're an American, but look at the world news sometime. If you want a fright show, you want a horror show, go look at the news around the world, and it's the same story. It's violence, typhoons and cyclones and floods and heat waves that are just unendurable all around the world. Everywhere you go, it's just looking bad and it's getting worse. Or don't, or don't. But if you do, you're going to recognize that what the scientists have been saying is almost certainly correct. And yeah, it's not happening 100 years from now. It's happening in your life, exactly as you're witnessing it, exactly as it appears to be happening. It's happening in your life. And they can't face it. They can't face it except through displacement. Displacement is when you blame someone else for your problems. Now, I'm not sure that's the exact clinical definition of it, but that's what I'm going to call it. You displace your anxiety about what is happening to you onto someone else. And then you feel better. Doesn't mean what's happening to you stops. Doesn't mean your situation gets better. You just feel better. And that's why it's psychotic, right? The assumption is you can't change your situation. And that's where the psychosis comes from. You're in a trap and you just realized it. And now you need to blame somebody for that. I don't think anybody who's doing displacement and witch hunts and things, I don't think they ever think that their situation is going to improve. Hanging a witch actually doesn't bring the crops back, does it? Finding someone who can't fight back and accusing them of witchcraft and torturing a confession out of them and dumping them in the pond and dragging them out of the pond and hanging them from an oak tree, that doesn't bring your crops back. That doesn't put the rats back in the well. That doesn't do anything. But it makes you feel better. And so that's what these hillbillies are doing. They're horrified. They're horrified. They're living through a nightmare. And you can see it in their eyes. They're just completely flabbergasted. They don't know what to think of this. And they all go to church and they all pray and Jesus is going to save them. And I mean, you think that if Jesus is going to save them and they're all going to go to heaven when they die, then they really shouldn't care, right? Oh, this is okay. All those people died. Oh, that's fine because they all went to heaven. I went to church with those people. We prayed, and their souls were free of any dark spots. And so if they're dead, they went to heaven. Wow, that's pretty cool. You think they'd be okay, but they're not. They're not okay. The prayer doesn't help. The going to church doesn't make any difference. They're still terrified. And then they'll say, yeah, we're alive because we prayed to God and we're good religious people. And this is God's country. And that's why we survived. I would think you'd be blaming God for the catastrophe. But they don't blame God for the catastrophe. They blame the Democrats. And I saw one woman, none of these people makes up this stuff on their own. So when I say, I saw one woman, okay, she represents thousands of people because she didn't come up with this on her own. No one comes up with these things on their own. Either they don't have an opinion or they all have the same opinion. That's how this works. And some of these opinions they get online and social media. Therefore, they are actually getting them from the Russians or the Chinese who are sowing disinformation. So, but once they have them, then they all share them, right? And so when I say this one woman, that she really represents thousands, tens of thousands of people, because that's how this misinformation works. No one invents this stuff in their own head. They read about it online. And then that they just glom onto it because I got to find somebody to blame. And what she was saying, this one woman was saying, was that the Democrats are to blame for the hurricane. And then she kind of backed up a little bit. She says, I don't know how they're doing it. Okay. Because she doesn't understand physics, but she has to blame them. The Democrats are to blame for these hurricanes. I don't know how they're doing it, but they're doing something. They're doing something, and they're trying to destroy us with these hurricanes. Okay. In fact, she went on to say that there's a lithium mine up in this canyon, and the government wants it. Why would the government want a lithium mine? The government doesn't mine lithium. But she had to blame the government, and the current government, at least the federal government, are Democrats, right? The Biden administration. So she has an easy thing here, right? Uh, why would the Biden administration? Let's just stop and think about this. Why would the Biden administration want to dump 30 inches of rain on Western North Carolina? I mean, that doesn't even make any sense. What do they gain from that? That's a lot of work, right? A lot of energy, a lot of secrecy. It's a big conspiracy. So why would they even bother, right? This is Western North Carolina. It's not like this is North Korea or something. It's some existential threat from North Korea. We'll just dump a bunch of rain on them. Why would they do this on Western North Carolina? Gosh, I don't even know. I mean, this is kind of unhinged. Even having this thought that the Biden administration did this, even I can't really understand this. Oh, wait. I know what it is. There's a lithium mine up in that canyon, and the Biden administration wants it. The U.S. government doesn't mine lithium. Number one, corporations mine anything. If there's a coal mine, some corporation owns that. If there's a gas fracking operation pulling natural gas out of the ground, mining natural gas, that's a corporation. If there's a bunch of oil wells out in the ground pumping oil out of the ground, that's all going to a corporation. And if there's a mine up there, well, it means that someone dug a hole in the ground, right? There's a mine. That's a hole in the ground. So someone dug a hole in the ground, and that's a corporation. And they're going to take that lithium out of there, and they're going to refine it, and they're going to sell it on the open market, because that's what corporations do. They make money. They take from the land, and they take from the workers if they can get their labor for cheap. And if you're in Western North Carolina, you can probably get labor, half price, right? Appalachia, $8 an hour, right? $11 an hour. Try that shit in California, you got to pay $30 an hour. But in Western North Carolina, hey, you get that stuff out of the ground cheap. So there's a mine, and there's a mining corporation. Who knows what they're called? North Carolina Mining Enterprises, right? Who knows what they're called? And so the Biden administration dumped 30 inches of rain on Western North Carolina because they want the what? They want the lithium? That belongs to a corporation. So, and why would the corporation dump 30 inches of rain on themselves to give the lithium to the government, just to give it to another corporation? I mean, what are you talking about? I'm getting a headache. This is so twisted and convoluted because it's unhinged. You see, it's unhinged. It doesn't have to make sense. It doesn't have to make any more sense than it rained really hard on the crops. The crops are ruined. This must be witchcraft. And therefore, we have to find someone that we can string up in an oak tree, and then we'll feel better. And so you go find someone who can't fight back. This old toothless old woman who kind of yells at people when they come close to her house, and no one really likes. And and she's about half crazy and probably, of course, lost her mind from loneliness and maltreatment. But we're not going to take any credit for that. So we're just going to take this old woman and string her up in an oak tree, and one, we got rid of this person who was making us feel bad about ourselves because we're neglecting her, and now she's dead, so we don't have to worry about doing that anymore. We're not sinning anymore, right? And two, we feel better about the crops being ruined. It's unhinged, right? It's makes no sense, but it doesn't have to make sense because it's a witch hunt, and that's what we're into now in America. We're into witch hunts. No, not all of us, but as these disasters roll on and get worse and worse, there's going to be more of this happening. More of this happening. Even people who think they understand climate change and global heating and science and scientific data, even people who kind of think they get it and who aren't completely flabbergasted and aren't completely unhinged with anxiety, they will start demanding witch hunts. And, there's lots of ways you can start blaming the other for what's happening to all of us. What that we all did, right? We all drive cars. We're all dependent on fossil fuels, in particular crude oil. We all want more crude oil. We all want cheaper gas. Even Kamala Harris wants cheaper gas. We all want more goods. We all want less inflation. We all want cheap energy. We all want free energy if we can get it, right? And that means more fracking and more drilling and more everything else. We all want that. And so at some point, because that's your trap, you're in that trap, I'm in that trap, you're in that trap, everyone's in that same trap. We're all trapped together, boys and girls. Let's all sing the trap song. I'm trapped, you're trapped, we're all trapped together. All right. That's the trap song. We're all in the same trap. The gate, so the trap is already closed, right? And we're all in there together and we can't get out because if we got out, we would die. Outside the trap is death. Oh, and inside the trap is death. There's death everywhere because it's a wicked problem. That's right. Either way you jump, you're gonna be in trouble. And so they're gonna lose their mind. Even people who think they understand the problem are gonna lose their mind. And I see this all the time on YouTube. All these people who pretend to understand global heating and climate change, and they get on there and they talk about how we can fight climate change. We can take climate action. We can reduce CO2 emissions. We can save the climate. We can prevent global heating. We can stop global heating and reverse it. And I hear this stuff all the time. It's completely unhinged. You're not doing any of those things, you stupid motherfucker. And you're claiming to be science-based, you're data-based. You think the data is telling you that you're going to win? You're going to reverse climate change? You're going to reverse global heating? Really? That's what the data is telling you? It's not telling me that at all. I think you've lost your fucking mind. Yeah, you're claiming to walk on my side of the street, but you're just as unhinged as those people who think the Democrats made the hurricanes. That's my phone. That's my wife. I will end this now. I've said enough. You get the idea. Don't forget to leave a like and a subscribe. I come back once in a while and do this. Not so much right now because I'm really busy doing other things. Talk to you later.